Greetings, folks. Iolair here. Thanks very much for joining my review of the new premium Tier 9 German super heavy cruiser, the Ägir. I'm going to break this up into a two-part review with two videos. This first one that you're watching will be a replay with commentary about the ship and how she handles and plays. And then the second part of the review, under a separate video, I will go into the details of the ship specifications and more detail on my build and some options and variations on the build that you may want to consider. Now, this match is a Tier 10 domination battle on islands of ice with one destroyer and one carrier per team. Although for purposes of this match, our carrier player might as well have not showed up at all. I am running a full tank build for the Ägir with a couple variants from what I did with the Siegfried, and I will discuss the build again in a lot more detail in the second part of the review. Again, I will leave a link to that second part or a link to the video of the second part in the description below. So I am Division with Jimmy Jazz in the Jutland and Lynn Wilkie in the Musashi. And we are over here on the east side over by Alpha, which we have successfully secured. And we're looking to try to get a handle on this flank so we can try to push through, although the opponents here are pretty strong on this side right now. And the main radar threat is the Donskoy, which Lynn has has promptly citadeled, although we didn't quite take him down. We do give up first blood by losing our Atago. I think that was over on the west flank over by Alpha, and I'm trying to help Lynn get this Donskoy down or at least pushed away so that we can try to push through on this flank. And then we do have a couple of heavies over here. We have a North Carolina and an Ismo. And for those of you that may have seen a brief video clip that I put up a day or so ago, you might recognize what's about to happen here with this North Carolina. Oh, there are the torpedoes from the Dmitry Donskoy. So Lynn and I have pretty well driven off the Donskoy. He's sort of in a tail chase right now. And we have the North Carolina that you can see right here in front of Lynn and me. Lynn, again, promptly gets, well, either a Citadel or a lot of penetrating hits through the bow of the North Carolina. And then I told Lynn, hey, and I said, Lynn, I'm going full German on the North Carolina. I'm going to push in here. But in order for me to get the torpedoes away, I'm going to have to sort of nudge Lynn aside here on my port side and get the torpedoes away. And again, this is the clip that I showed from a video about a day or so ago. But what's interesting is that while I did get all four torpedoes on, it wasn't the torpedoes that killed the North Carolina, it was my secondaries. So one of the characteristics of these German super heavy cruisers is that they all carry the 128 millimeter secondary guns that are present on the Gneisenau Bravo hull, as well as the Große Kurfürst, and they have the 1/4 penetration, which means that they penetrate 32 millimeters out of the box. And that means that when they hit, they actually have a pretty good chance of actually doing damage instead of just showing up as a purple ribbon on your results. So I was looking to try to get this low health Des Moines down. We still have the Dmitry Donskoy that's gone to concealment. Presumably he's trying to reposition here. We also have this Ismo, and I was being kind of, well, a little bit apprehensive about making this turn in front of this. Yeah, it looks like the Ismo is now going to target me, but I'm kind of committed at this point to make this turn. Here comes the salvo. I'm hoping I can turn away enough that I will be able to bounce some of these. A couple of overpens, nothing too bad. So that wasn't too bad. When I go through a detailed review of the ship specifications and port in the second part of the review, I will go over her armor, and so you'll understand some of the things that she can do well and some of the vulnerabilities she has with her armor. I did send torpedoes here in the event that the Des Moines continued to back up here, but our Montana was able to take him down. Now, looking at the tactical situation, things are going to get decided here at Bravo. So Jim in the Jutland did move over to Bravo earlier, trying to get that cap because neither team had contested it. He is now being contested by one of the destroyers. I forget which one this was. That's in the cap with him. But the problem that Jim has isn't the destroyer, it's all of the backup that he has. So you can see over on the northeast side of the Alpha cap is a number of opponents, a very strong force. They have or they, at least until recently, had an ability to fire on Jim. Jim has lost the majority of his health He needs to get out. Although our Moskva is able to take down the destroyer. The destroyer was a Benham, so but thankfully I remembered that now, or once I saw the ship went down. So it looks like we might be able to get Bravo here, but our position at Bravo is not quite as good as the opposition's. The opposition is sort of fanning out a little better in terms of being able to fire on our allies as they're pushing toward the Bravo cap. So, for example, we have a Worcester that is to my southwest position. He's pushing in. I'm trying to get in some shots here on some of these targets as to try to sort of discourage them from advancing too far. I am firing on a Georgia, and also there is a Chapayev, and I believe there was also, I know that, yes, there is a Shikishima in this forest that is over, that's pushing into the Bravo cap, and you can see that Jimmy Jazz is trying to get out now. We have an Iowa that's in Bravo. He is overextended, so he's going to be a prompt focus of the opponents. Now, one thing I should call out here, there was a quick exchange of ships there. Our Iowa did take down the Chapayev, but we lost a ship as well. I don't remember. I think that was the Worcester that was trying to push into Bravo. But one thing that I'm going to note here, as far as the play style of the Ägir. So the Ägir plays as the long-range artillery cruiser like the other German heavy cruisers. Obviously, her guns are a larger caliber, and one of the things that I have found is that I will fire AP 95% of the time, even against angled armored targets. The only time I found now, let's get Jimmy Jazz here on my port side as he's trying to get away. The only time that I'm really firing HE now, what I found is against destroyers, when I know for sure I'm going to be firing on a destroyer, or if I'm having to fire on a bow-on, heavily armored target like a GK or a Yamato. Oh, by the way, I'm going to pop Hydro here and light up the Minotaur who's coming across and getting a heal in, and I'll send out an AP salvo here, and that's goodbye to the Minotaur with a triple citadel, and I do get a devastating strike there. Or that, in fact, that's my second one of the game. So the AP is very good, and again, I'll go over more details, specifications of the AP in the second part of the review. But for purposes of play, I generally found that I'm firing a lot more AP than I originally thought I would. I thought I would play this a little more like the Scharnhorst when she's up tiered, fire HE more regularly at armored targets and AP less frequently. But I have found that these shells perform more consistently better. Well, I don't know if that's a proper expression. They're more consistent in terms of performance than the HE. Even when I'm firing on targets that are somewhat angled. There I got a nice almost 11k salvo on the Shikishima. I'm going to be firing on this George as well. We've just lost Lynn on the south flank. Even though the ship counts are even, the opponents have Bravo. We're actually in a much worse position than the opposition. In fact, as I mentioned earlier, our carrier player, which is up in the northeast side of the map, the Saipan, for all intents and purposes, he might as well have not showed up to the game at all. Based on what we saw in Matchmaking Monitor, this was literally the player's seventh random battle on his account, and it was his first battle with the Saipan. And when we look at the results, the leaderboard at the end, and how little experience he gained, it's kind of apparent that this player was very new. I'm not going to make any personal judgments of the player, but for purposes of being able to try to succeed in this game, that made it much more difficult. One more salvo here on the Georgia, which is also burning. I think I'm going to sink him here with a couple of overpens. Yes, I do. Okay. Now, we have a very close brawl between a Georgia and a Moskva, which has just now gone down north of Bravo. That leaves Jimmy Jazz, myself, and our effectively ineffective carrier. So materially, it's Jimmy Jazz and myself at this point against two battleships, a cruiser, and an aircraft carrier that has had some efficacy in the match. The remaining cruiser is a Worcester. So Jimmy Jazz and I were not sure how to proceed at this point. The best thing to do, in my experience, when you're in these situations is try to focus opponents one by one. My preference would be to try to go after the Georgia. Unfortunately, part of the problem for me, even though I'm a very well armored cruiser, and again, I'll go over the armor scheme in port, uh, the uh, the armor here is not going to tolerate the 357 I'm sorry, 457, as well as the 510 millimeter AP salvos from these two battleships very well. The only hope I can make is that if I'm angled well enough that they bounce off my belt, but that isn't always going to be the case. Here's the Worcester. He's trying to fire on me, but he's quite far, or actually he might be firing on the carrier. Oh no, he's not close enough to fire on the carrier. But he starts turning in on the salvo. I was hoping to get a nice big hit and maybe take him out of the match, try to even things up a little bit. But he did start turning in after I fired. And at this point, I know I'm going to be in a crossfire between the Georgia, which has now just showed up to my west. And yeah, here comes a salvo from the Georgia. And oh, that could have been much worse than it was. No Citadel hits. Maybe it's possible that my turtleback did keep me from taking a Citadel, but this is definitely a Citadel hit from the Shikishima. I know at this point it's very hard for me to try to angle up against both of these ships. I also want to try to not keep turning away, because if we want to have any chance of trying to take a cap, I have to be able to turn back in. But unfortunately, the time of my turn was quite poor. Shikishima is firing again. I'm going to try to angle away here, and one more pen through my stern. So it didn't quite finish me off, but I know that the next salvo that either one of these battleships gets on me is going to take me down. Now here comes the Georgia. He is using his speed boost to catch up here quickly. I send my torpedoes short here, but this Georgia player is very skilled, and he knows I've sent torpedoes, and he will slow and not take any torpedoes. That takes me down, and I'm going to cut to the end screens here fairly quickly, because unfortunately this is a loss. Our carrier does go down, but Jimmy Jazz survives. So individually, I thought I did pretty well. So 157,000 in damage, 3 kills, 2 devastating strikes, close quarters, and almost 1,400 base XP. So this would have been a 2,100 base XP win if we had one. So the Ägir is a very capable super heavy cruiser, and hopes that some of the gameplay here in terms of her capabilities and damage production, it reflects that quite well. So please do catch the second part of the review, and again, we hope to see you out there on the virtual seas, and we wish you happy sailing.